Good evening, everyone. This is the Finance Committee. This is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. It is 6:31. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A, Section 20. And on March 29, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing remote and hybrid meetings options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. Well, welcome everybody. It's been a while since we've had a meeting. Welcome back. We have a full big agenda tonight. We're going to start off. We have some year-end transfers that the town accountant has asked us to do. And so these are ones that have come in front of us after town meeting. So we did a number of them at the town warrant, but these have come afterwards. I do not see Nicole, but Jim Hartnett is here in case we have any questions. Hi, Jim. So the first transfer that we have is for, and again, for those of us who may not know, so the year-end transfers need to be approved by the department that's transferring the money from, and then the transferring the money to, and then the select board also needs to sign off on that, and they have signed off on all of these transfers at last night's select board meeting. So now the Finance Committee also needs to approve these transfers. So the first transfer is $4,755, and that's going from the Police Department Personnel Services to the Fire Department General Expenses. Jim,
hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi, Chief. Hi, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having myself and Deputy Chief Rebello here with us this evening. So just to go over this transfer, the police department is seeking funds to do seal coating and line striping, kind of preventive maintenance for our driveway here at the police department. The fire department was also looking to utilize the same service with the same company. By allowing this transfer, the funds would be fiscally prudent with the crew and the equipment being present on site for the same services for the two town departments. Chief Baldwin is in concurrence with me where he doesn't recommend seal coating, only crack repair and line striping. So this is the reason for the request for the transfer.
Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions on that transfer?
Move to approve. Hugh Morton.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And any other discussion? Nope. I'll do a roll call. Al?
Aye.
Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle, if you can.
Michelle Orlando, aye.
Thank you. Gary?
Yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
And Karen Ross, aye. Thank you. The second transfer is $25,000 going from the fire department overtime to the fire department equipment. Is there anyone that can speak to that for us?
Hi, Karen. This is Jim Hartnett. So I don't have the exact transfer request, but in speaking with the chief previously, it was just for some supplies and equipment. They had some additional money left in the personnel account.
Great, thank you. Al, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
This afternoon, I spoke with the chief as well after he spoke with Jim and as being the liaison. I just wanted to get a handle on 25,000. It is for things like they need new tires. There's $6,000 or $7,000 for tires. There is repair and maintenance at Station 2. the doors specifically. There's $3,500 there. The highway department, and taking nothing away from the highway department, informed the fire department, and I'm assuming the police department as well, that they could no longer staff mowing. So a mower had to be purchased. So these are just three examples of things. There's no fat in it. There's no, there's no side door issues. I mean, these are needed things. And my recommendation, after speaking with Dan and knowing Dan as well as many of the others of you, that these are legitimate expenses that need to be covered.
Thank you, Al. Cindy, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
I'm only going to say 3 cheers. Finally, the highway department is no longer responsible for the mowing at the police and fire station. It should have been their business in the first place. So thank goodness for that. I approve wholeheartedly a mower. So good. I'm glad the highway department isn't doing it anymore.
Do you also wholeheartedly endorse somebody on that mower, or just the mower itself?
Doesn't matter to me who's behind it, as long as it's not on the highway department payroll.
All right. If no other question, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this transfer, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I'll do a roll call. Al.
Al Lees, aye.
Hugh.
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy. Michelle.
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle Orlando, I.
Yes.
Gary. Christopher.
Christopher Thrasher,
Duncan?
aye.
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach.
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Karen Ross, aye. Thank you. The next transfer is $218,000, $497, going from the police department personnel services to police department general expenses. And I'll turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to give a little background on this. In FY24, the police department has a surplus in personnel services due to 3 full-time officer positions remaining vacant throughout the fiscal year, along with 2 retirements in January and 1 in April. The budgetary transfer is needed to cover unanticipated expenses related to our police building, cruisers, new unfunded E911 mandates, and compliance with the public records law. Additionally, to support our goal of 31 full-time officers, we need to acquire the necessary equipment to properly outfit them. So this is also in the fact that we've been short at least 1 dispatcher throughout the year, if not sometimes 2. Just to kind of go over a few of the items that we're looking for. One is called the digital lodging recorder. It's a state-owned E911 system. Currently now it's on the town, where we're now required to record non-emergency calls for service. So this is one thing we're looking to purchase. Another thing is what's called redaction software. As we know, we have body worn and cruiser cameras. By having redaction software, will actually put us in compliance with the public records law requests. Regarding our 5-year-old station, we need to do some upkeep to prevent small problems from becoming larger ones. We have data on an old server, which needs to be migrated to prevent the loss of archived data, and decommission the old server, which is taking away from resources from our IT department. In my finance committee presentation, I brought up how we're short-staffed. We since that time, we have 2 Westport residents who will be attending Police Academy in August. We're hoping to get up to our fully budgeted amount of 31 officers, and with that, this is the needs of equipment for our officers in our town. So, if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Gary.
Were any of these items presented to Capital? I'm just curious.
No, none of these items were presented to
Okay.
Capital.
Gary, I think one thing that could be said is the money sort of came out of nowhere because it was intended to be used for employment of officers who turned out either to retire or not to be there. So it wasn't something planned. It just happened through circumstances.
And I would just like to weigh and tee off on what Hugh just said. They were unanticipated, and they're probably not going to be recurring to that extent. And lastly, I want to commend the chief and the deputy and the others within the department for forward thinking. They're anticipating certain expenses that, rather than every year kind of scrambling to get A, B, or C, whatever it might be, using this kind of one-time, I'll use the word, these are my words, windfall, if you would, to boost up our capabilities within the police department over the next 3 to 5 years or whatever it might be. So I just wanted to weigh in on that, please.
The number of them I just add in is, of course, the chief has the details, but are mandatory, such as software to deal with camera pictures and so forth. So if there are mandatory deletions or redactions that take place, but the present software doesn't do that. So it has to be acquired, and this is one of the things that's being acquired, is something that has to be done but couldn't be done without the revised software.
Thank you. Cindy, you have your hand up.
I would just add also that many of the items on the list, although not all, are not really capitalizable. I mean, they're really expense items, so they wouldn't necessarily have come before the Capital Improvement Planning Committee because they wouldn't have been of such capital significance and capital duration. They wouldn't have a livelihood that could be necessarily marked that would be included necessarily in the CIPC. So, some of these are just very badly needed expense items that, the chief finds himself in the department finds himself in a position where, they're not always going to have this much money left at the end of a year. And I think this is a good way to be able to put some of that money to good use, because it wouldn't necessarily be used for, as I said, as a capital expense.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll second.
Sure thing. So discussion. So Zach, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I was just curious. It looks like one of the items was a drone upgrade for thermal capabilities. Just purely out of curiosity, I was wondering what the thermal capabilities could be used for. And secondly, do we currently have someone on staff that can operate the newly upgraded drone, or is this like, a very specific, skill set to operate this?
Madam Chair, if I can defer to Deputy Chief Robello on this, please.
Yeah,
Sure thing.
absolutely. So currently I do have a Part 107 license to fly the drone. The current drone we lost thermal capabilities. We did previously use those thermal capabilities to find somebody that was suicidal and they had been lost in the woods. We just recently had an incident on Route 6 with a cow. We had to call in another community with their drone because ours wasn't available to do that. We are planning on having additional operators to fly that drone besides myself. So that's in the plans as well, to have people that are pilots that have the Part 107 license to fly that drone and have that capability for us. So it's a very robust system. There is specific training that you need to fly it, but it does give us quite an opportunity to utilize that in a situation where you send in, I've said it before in an interview before, you're sending in hard assets instead of soft assets, and identify what's going on and get a lay of the land, if you will, to find out what's going on before you deploy personnel into that situation. We utilize it for search and rescue mostly, just to find people, cover large areas at a quick pace. The thermal is what helps us do that. With just a regular camera that's on there, it's very hard, or it's very easy to miss people. And with the thermal capability, it allows us to pick up things. And again, we had Dartmouth help us at one point in time with something like that because we don't have that. But having that on staff allows us to deploy it immediately and rapidly, so that way we can get the situation under control more quickly.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Karen, you're on mute.
I'm on mute.
There you
I'm
go.
off mute now. Thank you. The birds are chirping, so I'm trying to keep my camera, trying to keep my mic. So any other discussions? If not, I'd like to do a roll call. Okay, roll call. Al first.
Yes, Al is aye.
Thank you. Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle. I think we lost Michelle for the note at 6:44. She dropped off. So hopefully she'll be back on shortly. Gary,
Yes.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach,
Zach LeBrew, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. We appreciate everything you do, and you're free to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're free to go.
Thank you for having us. We're actually having a budget meeting with Hillary Harris right after this, but thank you, and thank you to the committee for allowing us to do this. We appreciate
Great,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thank
Have a
you.
great day. Thank you.
All right, the next transfer is $17,186.40, and that's going from the election registration personnel services to election registration general expenses. Nicole, you're here. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what that is, please?
Okay, so this is just extra money that is in their personal services because the assistant registrar was out on extended family medical leave for medical issues, and the town clerk discovered that there was some a mass mailing that needed to be done that hadn't been done in a couple of years to update the voter registration. So this is to cover the expenses of the mass mailing and a couple of she had a couple of trainings that she needs to send both the assistant registrar and the assistant town clerk to, increase postage costs for everything that has to be mailed, whether it's the census, the voting. So that's what this was going to cover.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Does anyone, Nicole, does anyone have any questions? No,
Move to approve.
thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Nope, I'll do a roll call. Al?
Karen, one thing.
Oh, sure.
Does Nicole know, or does anybody know, maybe Jim, for the FY25 budget, have we increased this? Because we're gonna have we're gonna have multiple elections now in the budget, in the fiscal year.
As far as I know, the town clerk has adjusted the budget for this year's election.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? No. Okay, so back to our roll call. Al?
Al is aye.
Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle is still not back. Gary?
Yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. The next transfer is $2,500, and that is debt retirement interest for the campground going to debt retirement for Bristol Aggie. Nicole, could you give us a quick one on that as well, please?
Okay, so what happened was the estimate that we budgeted for Bristol Aggie's debt payment came in slightly higher than we expected, and so we need to cover this $2,500 from interest to principal.
Thank you, Nicole. Any questions? All right, looking for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? I see none. So roll call. Al?
Al is aye.
Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle is still not here. Gary?
Yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
And Karen Rouse, aye. And we have one more transfer, and that is 20,076.98 going from the library personnel services to library general expenses. Nicole, if you could.
So the new library director sent a list of items that she was wanting to purchase. I think one is a lawnmower as well. And this is due to the timing between when the previous director left and the new director is on, and they still don't have an assistant director. So there's extra money in personnel services.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Gary, go ahead.
Did she say this was for a lawnmower?
Yeah, I think there is a lawnmower on her list of things to purchase. We're talking about the library, right? I think the highway department used to mow at the they used to mow at the library, but due to short staffing, the highway department is unable to do that anymore.
So who mows at the schools?
The school department.
So I mean,
I believe the school has a contract with someone.
Yeah.
So the school. Oh, so the school maintenance does not mow.
No.
The grass.
The school maintenance does mow some of the grass. I think around the new schools. At the old high school, they have a contract, and I do think they contract some of the. They may contract the fields out, but they do mowing around the
So
school.
I guess this is more about principle than anything else. Why wouldn't they just mow the library? I guess I don't understand why we have to purchase a lawnmower for the library. They're already at the schools. It's pretty much attached. I just don't understand why it's not. I mean, I'm more of a principle than, it's almost one continuous piece of lawn. I don't know. Have we reached out to the schools to see if they would even entertain that, or?
We had talked to the school about plowing when they plow their schools, to plow the library parking lot sidewalks, and they've agreed to do some of it, but it gets complicated. There's union issues. There's two different unions. There's one for the school, one for the library. They're short staffed as well. I think they're down 3 maintenance staff people right now. So, yeah, common sense, it should work, but in reality, it just doesn't work out.
Zach, go ahead.
I think that's a valid point to bring up, and you don't just buy a mower, whether it's $10,000 or $20,000, and your grass is just cut. Who's going to cut the lawn? Where's the mower going to be stored? Who's going to do maintenance on the mower? What happens when the mower breaks? Is it worth looking into, the person who's contracted for the old high school to mow the library as well? Or do we have a maintenance plan and, a labor plan to actually cut and mow? They're going to weed whack as well. Do they weed whacker, hedge trimmer? Just a couple of questions to throw out there.
I just see this like, Karen, we're going to have everybody in every department now. And believe me, I've been to the DPW facility, the highway facility. I've looked at all their equipment. I've had a tour of the roads and everything else. But I'm saying, because the facilities are so close to each other, I like Jim said, the reality of it is that we may not have people to run this equipment, but it being so close, I mean, wouldn't you think that the schools would want to maybe cut the grass? I'm just fearing that now we're going to have departments coming in looking for not only lawnmowers, but other equipment.
Well, that's the nature of what's happened now, right? Everyone is cannibalizing for themselves. I mean, the sum of the parts is certainly greater than the whole here. Yes, if we had an overall plan to take care of all of the lawns, far less than what it is for each department to do so. But everybody feels so threatened in their own budget as to what they can and cannot do for another department. We're way past that now. We're way past where people can help one department or the other if it's going to be at the expense of their own budget. So every man for themselves. That's what it's turned out to be, not just in town, everywhere you go. That's what's happened now, because budgets are thin all over the place. And I'm not saying that, no one wants to help each other. Jim raises a valid point. You've got union issues. You've got manpower issues. Do they have enough staff one place or the other? I mean, why doesn't the cemetery department do it? Their primary job is to mow. So maybe cemetery should do it and not the highway department. I don't know, but I guess that's not up to us to decide, but maybe there should be a larger plan. And as Zach pointed out, there are other issues. There are tertiary issues that go along with buying a lawnmower. And that's why we use a lawn service. And my husband's not going to cut the grass every week because of all those issues that he just described. So that's what happens. They would be better off just using a service. Far better off. I would be much more inclined to approve them using a mowing service, employ someone from in town, utilize a business in town and do it rather than getting somebody to cut the grass and weed whacking and fixing it and storing it. They should just hire a service to do it.
Before we, Nicole, can you do me a favor? Do you have any idea how much of the $20,000 that's in this request is for a lawnmower?
Hold on, let me.
And these are all valid points, but I want to make sure we're spending our time appropriately at this point.
Well, I know, like I said, some of it is for office supplies and work to the building, I think. All right, I'm trying to see. I know she sent me emails.
Well, while you look for it, Hugh, you have your hand up, so why don't we keep going? But I just want to understand the materiality of this. So.
It looks like it's a little over 16,000 for the lawnmower.
Woo!
Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!
And I think also Zach's point's very good. Everybody's got a lawnmower. Where are they going to get stored? Lawnmowers are used occasionally, as it were, maintenance, repairs, all that stuff. So that if this money's already been spent, that would not be good when we haven't approved it in advance. If it's been spent, it's probably a done deal. But if not, all these points are very valid.
Go hire a service.
There must be another way to do it.
Yeah, go hire a service. $16,000 buys you a lot of lawn service.
Right.
It does.
I don't think it would be spent, Hugh, because the transfer hasn't been approved. But go ahead, Jim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so we've looked at a number of different options, and I haven't been that involved with the library, but I was talking to the fire chief today, and they were looking to contract it out, and the cost was over $800 a cutting. We still have to pay prevailing wage. It's expensive. It's actually cheaper for them to pay their own staff overtime to cut the fire department lawn. The highway department has been using a seasonal worker the last few years who's been cutting mostly the library, the police, fire, and some of the landing properties. He did not apply again this year, so they just don't have that staff person. They have union issues as well. We have 2 labor relations suits against us now for doing work outside what they believe is their union contract. So it's just difficult to move somebody from one spot to another. I'd love to just say, okay, let's hire a contractor. And, the school is going to be paying, I think, $34,000 for them to cut the grass at the old high school for the year. It gets expensive. The library has a decent sized lawn. Their whole back, you don't really notice it, but the whole back of the property is, they must have a good over an acre of land that's grass behind the library. So it's fairly substantial. It's just not a good situation anywhere around. I don't have a good answer for you. Ideally, you'd like one department to do it all, right? They could service, they could maintain it, they could store it. And you have one guy that does it, but we don't have that luxury.
Jim, did you say it's $34,000 to cut the grass at the old high school?
Yes. Last year when we were looking, we were short cemetery staff. We actually hired a a couple of times to cut a couple of the cemeteries. And, it was take them about a day to do it. And, we were in upwards of $800 per cutting. I think one was $1,400. It's expensive. And like I said, you're paying prevailing wage. It's not like you can just hire a kid down the street and have them cut the grass for you. It just doesn't. And this year's been tough, right? We've had a lot of rain. When it rains, you can't cut the grass. When it rains, the grass grows high. So it's again, there's no good solution.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah.
Karen, can we make a motion? Can we make a motion to only fund a piece of the transfer, or do we have to fund the whole thing or nothing at all? Because you said there's other stuff built in there.
So here's the thing, the money is still going to be in that budget, regardless of where it is. And if they don't spend it, it will still fall into free cash, whether it's in personal services or general expenses. Jim can probably have a conversation with the director as the procurement officer and see if, we can work something out. Maybe something is a lesser cost. Obviously, we need to get 3 quotes for it and a contract under Chapter 30B procurement. So you could just approve the whole thing, and then we could, have a conversation with the director before any purchasing gets done.
So I guess the other question I have is, why is this not a capital item? Why is other equipment that the town need capital items, and then this isn't? I just don't understand I understand we got to cut grass, but what's that in the priority of all the other capital items that we have in town?
Well, I think this kind of came up more suddenly when the highway department no longer has that seasonal person to cut some of the grass at these other locations. And that's why these things are popping up. So the capital improvement planning committee starts meeting in November or December of last year, and they had no way of knowing to put that on their list for this year. But the other question, Nicole, that you brought up about procurement and 3 quotes and this, that, and the other, we're at the 18th of June. How are you going to get a lawnmower bought, have the bids procured and everything in 10 days?
So if it's between $10,000 and $50,000, you just need 3 quotes, whether it's written or verbal. It needs to be documented. Something like this could possibly be on a state bid list where the contracts and everything has already been procured, vetted through the state. So if it's over 50,000, then you need an RFP and all that kind of stuff. But between 10 and 50, it's just 3 quotes. Under 10,000, it's just sound business practices. So something like this, 16,000 seems like a lot, but for it to go to capital, it's kind of a iffy situation where is it a capital item? Is it not a capital item? What's the life of the equipment? Whether it's a fixed asset or not. So, but like I said, just because we're transferring it doesn't necessarily mean she has to purchase that. Like I said, we can work with Jim and the director and see what we can come up with.
Thank you, Nicole. Al, you've got your hand up.
I do. And, in a $54 million budget, 20 grand don't like a lot and is not a lot. But having said that, I really weigh in with Gary. This 16 grand for a mower, who's going to sit behind the mower? $800. I have a 6-acre field out of my house that I pay a third of the price for what the numbers are being quoted right now. And I look at the library and we're talking about an acre, and it's not so much the money in the overall budget. It is, does it pass the smell test with the taxpayer? That's what I'm going to propose. I don't know. I can go either way. It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't feel right. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Hugh, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say everything costs more these days, thanks to Washington and what they've been doing. So the figure strikes me as very high, but then you think about it twice. The thing that really goes through my mind is maybe we're gonna have a whole bunch of lawnmowers. Everybody has one, which is used on occasion. So maybe Jim already has this in mind, coordinating the hardware that's going to be acquired. Because if the police have one, and the fire have one, and the library has one, and pretty soon you got a whole garage full of lawnmowers. I'm sure that that's not going to happen because I think Jim is probably on top of it. But I'm with Al. There's no good answer. Something needs to be done though. The lawn needs to be mowed. It can't turn into a hayfield. So.
Do we know how much the lawnmower was for the police and fire station?
I don't offhand know.
I think I saw it was a Kubota zero turn, well over 16. If not, if it was a base model, it was at 16. I'm sorry to jump in, Karen. I just wanted to say, like, 16 from experience, literally in the industry in my past, 16,000 is a respectable number for a mower. Not trying to belabor that point, just trying to think in the long scheme of things, like it doesn't mow itself, and maintenance and long term, is this a sustainable solution, or is this, you know, I just didn't know if there was an opportunity to hire a service while we could come up with a better plan. And like you said, pretty soon, you know, maybe we'll have our own Westport community lawnmower service that we can start to generate some revenue here with these mowers. You know, these are commercial grade mowers. It does seem a little interesting that the library would request for a mower, and what's their plan to mow. That's it. I don't want to belabor it. I know we've got a lot of stuff to go over.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to weigh in too much more either. I just, you know, I think about 16,000 and I'm just curious, why wouldn't we have the highway department have more seasonal, pay seasonal workers, and then they go and use the same equipment and hire? It would seem to be more cost effective. But
it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to buy a lawnmower than to find a body that's willing to take the job.
Yeah. You
know, it's not easy.
So I will defer to the town administrator, feeling that this is the best of situation that we have for this. But any other comments? Do we want to make a motion to?
Well, I do have a question for Jim, for the town administrator. I mean, Jim, who do they have in mind to operate the mower? Do you know?
They have a maintenance staff person that.
Oh, they do.
They do.
Okay. All right.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
What's the motion? To approve?
Approve the transfer.
Thank you.
I'll second
that. Yeah.
All right. If no further discussion, Al?
I'm going to channel Hugh Morton from a couple of meetings before. Knows and say aye.
Hugh?
I'd be consistent with Al on that, yes.
All right.
Seeing no other real option, I think.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Thank you. I'll join the Hold the Nose Club, but vote aye.
Thank you. We still don't have Michelle with us, so I will go on to Gary.
No.
Okay, thank you, Gary. No. Christopher?
Yes, Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Thank you. Duncan?
I'm available to drive the mower, but Duncan Law, aye.
Thank you. Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Thank you. Karen Rouse, aye, too. Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of item 1, which is our transfers, so thank you. So the next item on the agenda is similar. So they're transfers from the reserve account to different places. And the only difference here is that the finance committee is the authoritative body for this. So certainly the select board should be aware of transfers that are being requested, but the select board does not vote on these. So these are purely at the responsibility of the finance committee. So the first item is to transfer the request is for $23,000 coming from the reserve fund to the town hall annex general expenses. Jim or Nicole, do you want to give us a quick?
Sure. So about 4 weeks ago, we got notice that there was no water at the town hall annex. We hired a company to go in to see if they could frack the well, which is about $3,200. They pressurize it and they try to get new veins to support flow into the well. But when they went to frack it, they realized that the well had collapsed and it was no good. So we had to get a replacement well put in. We hired a local driller from Dartmouth to put the well in. He put the well in. It's functioning now. We still have to go through the testing and permitting process with Mass DEP. It's a public water supply, so it's a complicated process. We'll have to do a 24-hour pump test. We've already sent the water out for testing. The well itself was about $13,000 or $14,000, and the permitting could go anywhere from $10,000 to $16,000 depending on the requirements from Mass DEP. We have a price now, I think, for $14,000 for the permitting. With this transfer and with some existing funds remaining in the accounts, we'd be able to cover that. And we're getting another price, and we're hoping that'll come in less. Just for your benefit, or it's not benefit, but just so you're aware, the well driller, when they went to put the pump in after it sat for a day or two, determined at the bottom 15 to 20 feet filled with sand. So he believes this is a temporary situation. I asked him what temporary means, and he said it could mean 2 weeks or it could mean 5 or 10 years. So, but it's not. He suggested we plan for a new well in a different location, which opens up a whole nother can of worms. Once you put a well more than 50 feet away from the existing wells, it's a whole other permitting process, similar to what we did at the high school. That is an expensive and lengthy process. So we're hoping this well lasts for a number of years, and we're looking at alternative sites in case we have to, but we're not looking to permit those sites at this time.
Great. Thank you, Jim. I just want to say one other thing on the reserves as well. So Mass General Law is specific that these reserves need to be only for extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures. So we would need to make sure that the reserve qualifies for that.
I guess this one is right on the numbers.
Sure is. Certainly very unforeseen. Gary, you've got your hand
up. Where is the location of the well again?
Location of the well is just outside the side door leading up to the conservation office.
Okay.
At the town hall annex.
Okay. And that's the existing well that's been there for decades.
So there's actually, this is the third well within about 50 feet. So there's one right up against the building, which is the old one. The well that we've been using, at least for the last 15 or 20 years, was probably about 40 feet away from that. And the new well that we put in, we kind of split the distance between the two.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Christopher, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just wanted to clarify. So this, I noticed that this item was on the list of the action items for the select board to approve, and they approved it last night. So I just wanted to clarify, this is only of the finance committee, or would it require the finance committee and the select board to approve these transfers? Madam Chair?
Does not require the select board.
Does not require the select board. Okay. So I am correct in that they did include.
I think it was on their agenda and they did approve it, but Jim, you can clarify it. It's not it's a finance committee requirement. So certainly the select board should and could and be responsible for the whole budget and be understanding of it, but the requirement is for the finance committee to approve. We don't need select board approval. There is no select board approval on this.
The department falls under the select board, so we felt that we should get their blessing as well.
Understood. And the so the 23,000 there, that is, are these expenses that already have been incurred
So
for the new drilling, or
we've incurred, I want to say it was 13 or 14 for the well itself. We've done some testing. I received a bill for about $600 today, but I'm waiting for another bill on the testing. We have our public water supply operator who has been kind of working with us. I haven't received a bill from her, and we're going to have to hire an engineering company to do the actual permitting with the state to permit the new well.
okay,
That has not occurred yet.
Gary, go ahead.
Can Nicole give us a balance in the reserve fund?
It's 100,000. It's 100,000 was funded and nothing has been to date been used.
Okay, that's
Correct.
prior to this transfer after we go. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Al, go ahead.
More of a point of information than anything else, Jim, if I can direct it through you, Karen. This is a public water supply, and it's the third one. Are we grandfathered, or is every well, is the original well grandfathered, but the subsequent wells need to have perimeters based on draw? It's a question. It's not whether or not we should have a well. It's a question.
So I don't have all the answers to this. My understanding in dealing with it, it's an existing approved public water supply. I think the state realizes that if the well goes bad, they need to come up with some alternative. We do not have the land area available on this side to put in a fully compliant well with the protected radius. We were able to reduce some of the permitting requirements by keeping it within 50 feet of the existing well. If we go beyond 50 feet, the permitting process gets a little bit more complicated, but you still would not have to comply with the protected radius required for fully compliant well.
Okay. It wasn't a trick question. I was just curious.
No, so I guess the bottom line is we do get some grandfather protection.
Gary, you still have your hand up? Do you have a question? Or was that from before? Oh, it's down. Okay. Oh, Cindy, go ahead.
It seems to me that seems to be a pretty low price, a pretty good price for all of that work. I mean, would that be typical of the price for the re-drilling of the well, or drilling a new well?
Okay. It was a good price. We had done the one at the school a few years ago. It was a little bit larger, but this price was very fair.
How far down did they go?
I want to say it was close to 150 feet.
Oh, so yeah, not that far. It wasn't like 250, 300 feet.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If no other questions, I'd like to ask for
Make a motion to approve it.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second. You, Morton.
Great. Any other questions? All right, so we'll go to a roll call. Al?
Al Lee's aye.
Hugh?
You, Morton, aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
Michelle is still not back. I think we lost her. Gary?
Yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
And Counterhouse, aye. Thank you. Okay, so the second request that we have is for $75,000 from the reserve fund to Westport Community School general expenses. I'm not sure, so I just want to I'm still very unclear on what the $75,000 is for, and I am still very unclear if this is a timing issue with credits or if this is a functional deficit issue with the budget. And so I'm unclear if this is even a reserve request. So just having said that, I'm still trying to gather a lot of information on this. This came to us last minute as the agenda was being put together on Thursday. And I wanted to put it on the agenda in the event that it is meets all the requirements, I wanted to make sure we had it so we can approve it. But at this point, I'm still questioning some of this. So Nicole or Jim, who wants to lead this discussion? Oh, Hugh, you want to ask a question before? Okay.
Yeah.
You already got your question in queue? Okay.
Okay, so Karen and I talked about this in detail yesterday, I think it was. I did send Karen, I don't know if you got my spreadsheet that I sent that shows over the past, the last fiscal year and this fiscal year, the credits that were for the new high school. So what this is the net metering credits, which I actually sent out what exactly these credits are. And what's happening is that for the past 2 months, we have not received any credits at all from the solar farm. I've been in contact with Eversource, and so far I have gotten very little information as to why. I've been in contact with the SG Projecto, who we pay for the net metering. They're like the, I don't know, like the company that owns the solar farms. And they don't know why we haven't received any credits from Eversource. So the problem is, and I know that Melissa Souza had sent out some information, this is going to put the budget very short because not only are we going to have to pay these bills, but we're also going to have to pay for the net metering credits when they do come in, when we finally get everything settled. And in our approximation is anywhere between 68 and 70,000. The summertime, like April, May, June, tends to be higher cost because there's more sun. So there's more kilowatt hours that are produced by the solar farms. So like the bill that we just received for the other solar farm was $14,000. So that's higher than the previous month, which was like $7,000.
So Nicole, before we go into questions, I'm trying to understand. So we talked yesterday or today, you're right, I don't remember when that was. Is this a temporary issue where the bills need to get paid and the school doesn't have anything left in the budget to pay? And so the reserve would be used to pay the bills, but then when the credit would come, then the town would get reimbursed for that? Is it a timing issue or is it a real budget issue?
So this is not a budget issue. This is it's something with Eversource. We don't understand why this solar farm, because we have 2 solar farms that we have contracted with to buy the credits. So the other solar farm is fine. We've been getting the bills, no issues. For some reason, like I said, for 2 months now, we haven't gotten anything from this solar farm. So it's something that if you look at the spreadsheet, Karen, I don't know if you sent it to everybody, but every single month we've been getting credits, which just about completely cover the bill that we do get for electricity. So where we're getting bills now with no credits, with no coverage, that's something that was not budgeted for.
Right. So the question, Nicole, I'm looking at what you sent to us earlier. The credits are $7,000 to $10,000. So if there's 2 months worth of credits that hasn't come through, that's $20,000, $30,000. I'm not understanding 75,000.
So actually, if you look back a year,
right.
So if you look at May and June, we had 30, 31, 30, 22. So we had like $30,000 in credits. So that's what I'm saying. So they produce more. We get more credits in the summer months. So that's April, May, June, which is what we're hitting now. And the bill, if you look at the electric bills are pretty steady, but without those credits, that's something that's not budgeted for at all. We're budgeting with the credits in mind. And by Eversource not sending those, that's putting it into a deficit.
So let me, so, and I know there's some questions coming. I just want to follow through on this. So again, if it's time, so you're saying it's not a permanent deficit, it's a timing that the credits have not arrived yet. So if the town were to fund $75,000 to the school so the bills could get paid, how does the town then get reimbursed that money back when the credits come? Because if that doesn't happen, then the school has received $75,000 to fund to pay the bills, and then later the credits are going to show up, and then the credits then also get applied to the school. Now the town is out $75,000 and the school's been given the 75, and then they get the credits later. So how do you address the timing? Because that's my question.
So this is something that I did discuss with Melissa earlier, and unfortunately Tom Aubin is not available, but her and Michelle Raposa were on board to say that once the credits come in, what we can do is we can hold their budget. They can do it on their end so that they'll turn back that amount of money. It's not something where we can say, oh, we can take it from the school and fund it back to the town, because transfers like that are not, we're not allowed to do transfers like that. But if we were to get the bills, the credits, because we're going to have to encumber the June bill. So if we were to get those credits coming in hopefully in the June bill, since we're trying, like I've been in contact with Eversource saying, hey, we need these now. Then it would be in their encumbrances and the money would come back and fall into free cash for next year.
Okay. So then I'm just going to paraphrase, and then I'm going to let the next 4 or 5 people in line ask questions. So if the town were to pay the bills through the cash and do a transfer, then the credits would come through, and that would be kind of a surplus to the budget. So the school would turn back $75,000 at the end of June, and then that would fall back into free cash, just as if it was in the reserve and the reserve wasn't spent, that would fall into free cash.
Correct.
So we could make itself whole as long as the school did turn over $75,000 as a turn back to the school. So if that's the way that it'll work, I understand now, and I'm going to allow the next level of questions to go through.
Karen, though, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Saying? But that would only be if it happened before June 30th of this year, in the next 12 days. Correct? Well, what you're saying is true if only it happens in the next 12 days.
No, because the June bill, so just like anybody else's electric bill, the electric bill will end June 30th, and we won't get the bill until probably the second week in July. So we've got that little bit of leeway where the bills come in and we encumber the money. So there's a June bill we're paying in July. So it'll be part of their encumbrances. I do have Eversource online, so I will be checking to see when the bills come in. I can go on to Eversource and pull the bills as soon as they're available. So I'm trying to keep on top of this to make sure that this gets done.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think we have a whole lineup of questions. So go ahead. I'm going to start with Al and then Hugh next. I think somehow you lost your position.
I'm not sure it was first, so I'll defer to my elder. And
okay, thank you.
I got a simple answer. Okay. Don't pay the bill.
Yeah, right.
Eversource.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. Is the source of the bills. Eversource is the source of the credits.
Right.
It's their bookkeeper talking left to right. Why do we put money into that system to get refunded? We just don't pay the bill while they sort it out internally. Yep.
So the only issue with that is that the school department is afraid that we'll get a shutoff notice and they will completely shut down.
I doubt it.
I
would think we would tell them up front, you better damn not do that, because this is your mistake. And if they were by some chance to do that, write to the Herald, the Globe, whatever you want to go to, because it's their problem that they are creating on one side or the other of the business.
You can start paying the bill on July 1st. You can start paying their July 1st bill even. Once they
That's a
have a
good idea.
documented bill, and as long as
Yeah,
they've got
exactly.
money,
Good idea,
as
Cindy.
long as they have money flowing, they can't shut you off. Screw them. Sorry.
Al, did you want to go and then Zach,
Sorry,
you're next?
I've been back enough. Sorry.
Couple of quick points, and it was Nicole brought it up, and I'm looking at the spreadsheet right now. In the 3 peak months of, and I have a pretty not huge, but a good sized bank of solar panels, so I understand generally how this thing does work. And if you look at May 1st, May 31st, and the end of June, we got about $92,000 worth of credits. Makes sense. I mean, it's 3 of the biggest peak months of the year. I had about a month or so ago, for mechanical reason, I lost 2 weeks of solar. I mean, it was mechanical failure. And so my credits went down. So one question I have is this an Eversource issue, which I don't like Eversource any more than anybody else, or is it a mechanical issue with one or both of the solar panel farms that are not producing or registering back to Eversource, the usage? I don't know that answer, but I think it's a question that needs to be answered.
Well, that's one of the questions on my list of things once Eversource gets back to me.
Okay, good, because it may be horrible, but let's take this one step further. If there's a mechanical issue with the solar farm, and we're tapping into that for credits, and there's a legit mechanical issue, we may well be out those credits. So I think we do need a solid answer, for that. The other thing too is if it's a bookkeeping issue or whatever, I totally agree with Cindy and Hugh, and I'm sure other people. To hell with them. Don't pay until they pay us. They're not going to shut us off. I mean, we do have some clout at the State House, a regulatory, among other things, and I would strongly suggest that we look at all the nuts and bolts, make sure that we are in line, that the power transfer has gone through the reverse metering system that they have, and that we're entitled to. I mean, my God, at the end of the month, if last year is the same as this year, it'll be $90,000 in credits, and then make the adjustment and go from there.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to say.
Great, thank you, Al. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just trying to look at like the billing terms to see, typically if you don't make a payment on time, there's a certain amount of interest that occurs, and I can't see it being a very high interest till this gets sorted out. I think it would be crazy to pay this. I would totally agree with you. If it's on their end, it's on their end. But I do want to understand there's 2 parties here, right? Are these credits going to Eversource and Eversource is billing us, or is there a third party that monitors and deals with the credit on these solar panels?
So the solar farm reports to Eversource. Eversource distributes the credit to the accounts that we tell them to, with the percentages that we tell them to, but they also report to the company, SG Projecto, and then they bill us based on the contract how much we pay for these credits.
Okay, and from your description earlier, it sounded like you haven't really been able to get a hold of anyone from either of those companies to give you an explanation or to work through the whatever the reason.
I have been in contact with SG Projecto because I just received the May bill for the other solar farm, and I spoke to him and I said, hey, what's going on with the other farm? And he doesn't know. He's looking into it on his end with Eversource, as well as I am contacting our contact at Eversource to find out what the issue is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that when you have an issue and it's not completely on our end, that you solve it by just paying it out of fear. I feel like it's going to be so much harder to get it back. I think it makes sense to not pay anything at all, or pay what you typically would, you know, shy of the credits. And if they ask where's the remainder, say where's our credits, and then go through the dispute for there. I don't personally fear if we don't pay net 30, they're going to shut down the power at the schools.
No.
Period.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zach. Christopher?
So just a couple of things here. I to Mr. Lee's point here, if this is something of a mechanical issue, or if there is a reason these credits aren't being applied that is more than just a bookkeeping error, then again you're looking at some significant unexpected, unanticipated costs that aren't budgeted for. It would seem to me, I do understand the sentiment of telling Eversource to go kick rocks for the time being. However, it's been, as Nicole mentioned, the school department is willing to figure out a way to turn this back if it's not needed, and if the credits do come through. I am concerned if there is more than just a bookkeeping situation that's preventing these credits from being applied. And so my recommendation here is, this is clearly an unanticipated, unexpected cost. This is what the reserve fund is there. If the transfer is made and then it's not necessary to use the transfer, then there's ways to bring it back. But the risk to me is not paying the bill. The risk is, what if this situation is something that is a permanent situation as far as the credit goes, even if it would be completely out of the town or the school department control, perhaps even Eversource's control. So that's my concern. That's why I would certainly recommend approving this transfer, with the caveat that if it is not needed, the turn back happens either at the end of the fiscal year or however it can be done in accordance with all the regulations as far as town department transfers go.
Thank you, Christopher. Just a quick comment in that I'm just not sure that this meets the criteria of a reserve, because it's not a real cost to the town. So we're using the reserve. We're asking the reserve to pay a bill that's not really a cost of the town. So I'm not sure I'm not sure it qualifies, but I appreciate the sentiment, and I'll also put out to the committee, we also have the ability to call another meeting next week or before the end of June if things haven't been taken care of, if not tonight. And Nicole, can you just clarify? I know regular transfers, you have until July 15th to do that. Do we have the same date with reserve transfers as well?
Yes.
So we have plenty of time. So if not tonight and not under an urgent thing where we're unclear, we have time we can call another meeting by the end of June if the bills need to be paid, or we have until July 15th to make this decision. So I want to also make sure the committee understands that too.
Okay.
So Gary, you've got your hand up next.
So I guess I'm a little confused here. If the schools are saying they're going to have 75 turn back to free cash at the end of the year, why are they asking for a reserve fund transfer to begin with? They should be asking for a line item transfer, just as we just did. They shouldn't be asking for a reserve fund transfer. In their budget somewhere, they must have $75,000 to turn back to the town, quote unquote, that they're going to do in the fall for free cash. So why can't we do a line item transfer, moving it from one of their accounts to pay this bill? I guess I'm just confused about the whole issue.
So they don't have that ability. They don't have it in any of their other line items. They don't have it in their electric, heat. Melissa and Michelle have gone over the budget, and it's not there.
I guess, Nicole, how will they turn back $75,000 in free cash in the fall if they don't have it now?
If we transfer this to them and they don't need it then they will turn back the 75 we gave them. So that's the 75 that they can give back. They don't have it anywhere else to give back. Last year, they turned back $55 from their budget. So their budget's tight.
I would suggest that, and I'm only making a suggestion, that we hold off on this until we can get clarification from Eversource, whether they're not going to come down here and pull the switch. I don't think that's ever going to happen, especially to municipal buildings. I mean, I haven't heard of it. So I feel that we should have more clarification on this. We should figure out, if in fact, bring Eversource down. If we have a rep, I know we got reps that handle these accounts, and just put the pressure on Eversource. It's the ball's in their court. This is actually probably an accounting flub on their end. So I would make a motion right now that we table this until we can get more information.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. So we can go into discussion here. We've got a bunch of hands back up. I agree with you, Gary. I think there's too many questions, and part of my question to Nicole is, we've talked about there's a lot of credits that have been generated that aren't being used. So if we'd actually pay cash, and then you're going to even have a bigger issue where they're not going to give you the cash back. They're going to just apply the cash and credit, and then the credit comes, and now you're out the cash and we'll never get it back. So I agree with you, Gary, but we've got Cindy, Al, and then Hugh have hands up, and then we can go to a vote.
So
go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, so you brought up exactly what I was going to say, is that it's difficult to get it back in the form of cash. And I'm sorry, a $21 million+ budget. I know last year they turned back $55. There's a reason for that. There's an accounting reason for that, why it gets spent down. I'm not saying that it's wrong for them to do that, but no differently than we've seen with other budgets tonight that have had year-end transfers, because they do not have the liberty to be able to take things from a salary item to an expense item. The school department does. They have complete line item flexibility throughout their whole budget. Right. And Karen had mentioned earlier in her commentary, why is it $75,000? Why aren't we paying it just the small amount that would have been the difference if the credit had been applied? So to apply the whole amount, and coincidentally so to be the balance of the reserve fund, and the fact that school has complete flexibility, I guess I would like to see how it all washes out at the end of their school year, and if maybe then apply some of those items to what's left, pay the electric bill, and then come back to see perhaps what the reserve fund could be used for in unforeseen expense items. I just find there are too many conveniences here, and too many things that I think could be avoided if somebody did some hard work with the pencil and looking into some of these other accounts. Every other budget is draining their budget. The schools have in the past. Maybe they can use some of that money to apply to this budget, to this payment, if they're concerned about the electricity being shut off. If it's a valid expense, fine, we can deal with it at some point, but there's no necessity to deal with it tonight.
Thank you, Cindy. Al, and then Hugh.
Excuse me. I would agree. I've been spending a lot of time looking at this spreadsheet, and there's a lot of numbers here that don't quite jive for me, going back to August of 2022, not necessarily just the usage, which were up 20% in usage at the high school in 2 years. But at the same time, our credits seem to be, I don't want to get into the weeds of this, but our credits seem to be fairly normal. I might suggest that we either table this for tonight and come next week, and or kind of go with what Zach was saying earlier. we have a bill, right? I mean, let's face it, what we're doing is niggling around right now with, do we pay, don't we pay, do we pay, don't we pay? And the school department has cooked into their budget an electric bill. Whatever that number is, what we're dealing with right now is, are we getting the credits? Pay them something. Send them 10 grand. I don't care, you know, whatever it might be to keep the cash flow going while we bore down into the numbers and have Nicole get some more detail of what's really going on. That would be my suggestion. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. I think
they should have money.
All the vote.
Right, they should have money in their budget to pay for what they normally would have paid for those 2 months.
I think we're ready for a vote, right?
No, I'm waiting very patiently.
Oh, go ahead, Hugh. Sorry.
And I'm with Jacob anyway, but a little more of it. If Eversource gets paid for this, that, and the other thing,
Everyone.
there has been no urgency in their bookkeeping department to sort anything out. They got the money. Oh, yes, we'll look at it and see what we can do, sort of thing. They're much better to discuss, negotiate with a guy who thinks you owe him money rather than the other way around. So that goes, A, push it over, yes. But B, don't pay it. The issue right now, Al is absolutely right, others are right. If there were a defect in the solar panels, and in fact, the credits were not earned, then we owe them the money because there aren't any credits that are mistracked. They don't exist. We don't know that. And Eversource seems to be in the position to get that, or the other guys they work with, but they're the guys who have the information, not us. And if they've got a bookkeeper or others that have a boss asking, how about that bill we haven't gotten paid? Are you working on it? Much more likelihood of spending effort working on it than, oh, those guys want a refund, don't they? Well, we'll get around to sending that when we have a chance. So, number one, don't do it now, see what happens. But my view as we talk about it gets stronger, don't pay it while it's getting sorted out. They aren't going to shut it off. That's not a possibility.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion to on the floor in a second to not approve this. Is that correct?
Correct.
I believe that's incorrect, Madam Chair. I believe the motion was to table.
Prove it.
To table it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The motion was to, until we get further information.
Right. To not approve it at this time, but yes, to table it. Okay, so that is the motion and there's a second. So I think we are ready to roll call. Al?
Al Lee's aye.
Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Cindy?
Cindy Brown, aye.
And I believe Michelle has lost permanently, so I will go Gary.
Yes.
Christopher?
Christopher Thrasher, no.
Duncan?
Duncan Law, aye.
Zach?
Zach LeBrew, aye.
Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. Okay, so we will, Nicole, we'll wait and see what happens. You keep us posted. If something urgent happens and we need to call a meeting to do something, we can. We certainly, I think our next meeting is scheduled for July 9th anyway, which would be our normal July meeting. So we would be within the 15th. So we'd be able to address it. So you just keep us posted if something comes up. Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I just want to skip ahead. So we've got minutes to approve. We can skip over that. We can do that at the end. I wanted to, so we've got some committee update meetings, but I wanted to just put on the agenda for just if anybody wanted to say any comments about the annual town meeting or the process that led up to that. I know right after town meeting, I think a couple of us were in one sense wanted to have another meeting so we can kind of debrief each other, because as time goes by, you kind of lose some of the things that you were thinking about. But I just wanted to put it on the agenda if anybody had anything that they wanted to comment on. Cindy, go ahead.
First of all, I think it's a shame that Steve Forrs is going to move on. By the same token, and I applaud him. He runs a very tight meeting, and I understand the reason behind it. but sometimes you got to have a little bit of room for people to understand sometimes what they're voting on, or the ramifications of what they're voting on. A good point is the short-term rental issue. When Jim Whiten stood up, he explained, now he does not have a towering voice, but he did explain, I heard him explain that absent an approval of some of the bylaw, that short-term rentals in town would be illegal. All existing ones would be illegal. And I've heard nothing but people talk about the fact that they had no idea that voting it down meant that they could have 0. And I think that sometimes some of those things get lost in translation in the rereading or the re-edification to the audience of what their yes vote or what their no vote really means. And it's not the power or the role of the town moderator to necessarily do all of those things. But I think that in that case, the planning board should have had the opportunity to one more time reiterate that that was going to be a problem. So I think sometimes the passionate people get up and, they get one side or the other, and I'm not rooting for one side or the other. And it gets lost in the amendments and in this, that, and the other. So I think there just needs to be a better way to communicate with people that was really going to become a problem. Not that it's a earth-shattering problem, but a lot of people had bad feelings about that. And also what the effects are of the no vote on the borrowing for the sewer. So a lot of people think that means that they were against the plan. But was it truly a vote just against the borrowing and not also against the plan? So I think that sometimes you need a little bit more clarification as to what's, what truly the ramifications are. That was really my takeaway.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, without going too much into warrant articles again. So anyone else have anything? I just wanted to make a quick comment, and we'll talk, I think, more in July. I think to some of Cindy's point, I think there's so much confusion. There's never that time for the educational element, which is the town meeting has its specific structure, right? Where you can't have a conversation and ask questions. And we always talk about, and we never can get to that point where we want to have that informal session to allow people that opportunity. And I'd like us next year to think about, is that possible and how can we make that happen? And so it's not a conversation for now. I just want to put that out there, that's a goal that I would like us to think about. There needs to be something, but that's just my comment on the town meeting. Not a conversation to go into now in detail, but that's just my thought. Hugh, go ahead.
Very brief. I don't have much enthusiasm about educational sessions. We had, 2 or 3 years ago, I think 4 people came. I mean, it's a matter of the degree of knowledge that people wish to acquire is really, I think, the hurdle. Jim Whiten had hearings that they're specified to have. I think that the sewer people did a terrible job of presenting it, etc. It came out of nowhere, and everybody had to vote on it within a month. I won't go into the details, into the merits, but just in terms of having a chance to educate people, it wasn't town meeting. It was just a lack of any time at all. So I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Hugh. Christopher, go ahead.
So I just kind of wanted to follow up on something Ms. Brown and actually Mr. Morden there both. I think unfortunately, there is a situation with town meeting where there seems to be, it's hard for the moderator to be in a position to allow not just facts to get out, but also when there's questions of interpretation. So, I would argue, not to rehash the whole warrant article, but there's a question of I think there is a valid question of interpretation as to whether if something's not in the zoning bylaws, does that mean it's automatically illegal? Now, the reason I bring that up is because it goes back into this idea of trying to educate and trying to have at least facts facts or something where maybe there's room for interpretation to have it available, but also Mr. Morton's point, people will be educated to the level or to the point that in which in which they want to be and no further. So that is a continual issue to try and triangulate. And I like the idea of having an education session, but I also realize the reality of it, and you'll probably get 2 people there. So yeah, it's kind of a tough catch-22.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. If no other comments, I just wanted to make sure we held a little space for the town meeting before we keep going. Okay, so the next item 5 is our committee and liaison updates. So generally, that's always a topic on our agenda, and we go around. This time, we have some pretty good updates from 3 specific committees, and there could be other committees that we didn't list, but I did list some discussion, some updates from the long-term building committee. There's some things happening there. We have the audit committee that the auditor reports are available, and the personnel board has a compensation and classification study draft that is circulating. So we've got 3 committees that we'd love to hear. I'd love to talk about the long-term building committee first, if we could. And I know Christopher's here, and Cindy is also on the committee. We should give the finance committee an update if everyone's not familiar with the recent school decisions that have been made. So Christopher, maybe you can, or Evan's here too, I think. So whoever would like to give the committee an update on what's happening.
Christopher is the chair of that committee. I would defer to him.
Okay, sure thing.
So yes, and as a matter of fact, it's worth noting here that there is a discrepancy in record keeping as to who is the FinCom representative on the long-term building committee and who is an at-large between myself and Ms. Brown. Still have not figured that out because I believe the town clerk has it in one way. Cindy being the rep. I believe the FinCom internal on the shared drive shows me being the FinCom rep. So we're still trying to figure that part out. But
Christopher, did you get a letter? Didn't you get a letter to get sworn in?
I did, and it says at large. So, but it's still. Okay. I remember having the conversation the very first meeting. So
well, anyway, we'll straighten it all out, and we can
And my letter says nothing. It just appoints me as a member. It doesn't say at large or.
We'll redirect all that in July. We can reappoint and kind of set everything straight. But go ahead, Christopher.
So the school committee, and of course I am a member of the school committee as well. There has been long-running conversations about the school administration offices being moved out of the old high school building. With the budget approved for fiscal year 2025, that decision has been made to move forward because if there is a saving attached to the administration moving out of the old high school building. There is also a kind of a personnel situation where by adding or by moving administration to the schools, that administration is actually in a better position to support the administration that's somewhat understaffed at the other schools as well. So as opposed to being in the old high school building. So that decision has come about. There is a continual dialogue and conversations between the school committee, Chairman Gendreau, the Superintendent Alban, as well as Michelle Raposa and several others in the school office have been having conversations with Mr. Hardnett and other town other individuals on the town side to try and figure out the smoothest transition. There is still some question from the town side as far as exactly what type of numbers are going to be additional costs incurred for insurance or for other issues. There are ongoing conversations about the school department still being responsible for example, the fields, mowing the fields. I know that's been a topic today here, and maintaining the fields. There would still be use of the building at least until such time as a decision has been made for storage on some of the, I believe, the garage and some of the basement for storage. This decision having been made by the school department also kind of, I guess, jumpstarts a little bit the question that's been kicked around for years now as to what to do with the building. I've certainly had many conversations within the committee and within the long-term building committee and beyond about many different options for this building. And the bottom line is that all the good options cost money. They cost money that the town nor the school department have in their budgets. And it's my estimation that whatever decision is reached, even if that is to demolish the building, even that will incur significant costs. It is my intention to we'll be having a long-term building committee next Wednesday night. It is my intention to entertain motions at that meeting with several options, one of which being to mothball the building entirely, one of which being to demolish the building. The third option being recommending that the money be allocated to create a centralized town office building. So all of these questions will incur costs. There's no way around that. So we will see what the again that's going to be on Wednesday night, and we'll see what the recommendation is that committee makes to be passed along to the select board. Perhaps there may also be a recommendation for either warrant articles or perhaps even overrides or ballot questions about funding whatever option is recommended. So
Christopher, can I ask you a few questions?
Absolutely, fire away. Yes.
Yeah. So the first part of what you said, and I know you're new to the school committee, so you said the school committee's been discussing moving out of the building for quite some time. So that's a surprise to hear, because that hadn't been discussed publicly, that hadn't been discussed with the select board, that hadn't been discussed with the finance committee. It hadn't been discussed. So where are those discussions happen? Because they don't appear to be in public. Because when the email came out, and to members of the select board, to myself, and to the town administrator, it was very much a surprise for Jim as well. It was 1 week after town meeting, and that's the first that everyone heard of it. So I'm just trying to understand that process.
I think there's two things worth noting here. That first off, I will say that I recall a joint meeting with the finance committee, the school committee, and I believe at least a couple of the select board members were there as well, where this was brought up by the then chair of the school committee. And I recall this very vividly because I was taken aback, because it did surprise me then.
Right.
And that was,
but not to interrupt, but the reason that was brought up that the school was considering leaving was because they had concerns that UMass Dartmouth was going to come in and the storage boxes were going to get in the way. So that was the discussion. There wasn't discussion that there had been talking of leaving.
Well, so it was my understanding that the UMass situation was the catalyst to bring it up then. However, there had been continual conversations. I recall that particular meeting talking about the costs, the maintenance costs, the additional. I mean, the school department is taking care of more right now. They're taking care of more buildings with less staff than they had before the new school opened. So The other thing is that when the budget came in and there was a necessity to absorb about a $400,000 cut in the budget early, and that's where every option that would incur some savings was considered. And so this had been, this was presented as one of the options that prior to my time on the school committee. This was presented as one of the options for savings, including some other, not so palatable options as far as cutting. There were all sorts of possibilities, including cutting teachers. The school committee and the school department, the savings that would be incurred from this move allows. I mean, the bottom line is that it allows teacher positions to be saved. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, but the bottom line is that it was made. There's a lot of good arguments for it to begin with, and with the budget as approved and with the cuts necessary to be made, it made this it brought this to the forefront of something that needs to be done.
I think some of the consideration that needs to be, it may save the school money, but it's going to cost potentially the town as a whole more money. So the town as an entity, it will cost more. So that needs to be considered, because the reality is, if it costs more to the town, then the school's going to see that 54% split come right back at the school. And so I'm not really sure where the savings necessarily come in, especially if it's costing the town more.
Well, this is the thing, and this is the thing that is worth noting here, is that the logistics of this are continually being worked on, and we actually don't know. I know that the school department has provided Jim and the town with the breakdown of all the maintenance costs, of all the costs incurred from the building, and there's still a couple of outlying questions on the town side as to where, for example, what the insurance cost will now be. There's estimates, but no hard numbers. So really trying to figure out what that actual number, whether it's an additional expense or in fact a savings, exists. We don't know that yet. But the other thing that I think is really important to consider here is that this is not something that's being done by fiat. All right, the school department's getting all their stuff out of the school and then saying the town deal with it. It is a collaborative effort being worked on to figure out the best way to. I mentioned this in the school committee meeting tonight before I logged on here. It's not about trying to take a burden and throw it at the town or throw it at the school. It's about trying to figure out the way to make sure to either eliminate or at least decrease the burden. So.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. So I want to ask a second question, and then I'm going to open it up because I think there's a couple of people that have here. So I know the long-term building committee over the last 5 or 6 years, so many committees before you and Cindy were on the committee, have been discussing what to do with this building for quite some time. And I understand that with the school now moving out of the building, that makes this more of a priority to figure out what to do. My concern is, and I mentioned this to you, is that I think the long-term building committee should do a presentation to the finance committee, and the finance committee should be weighing in. I mean, you and Cindy are the finance committee liaisons, and part of that is you're taking our advice and discussions and questions to the committee, and you bring the committee back to us to discuss. We have not discussed the long-term building committee. We have no presentation. We haven't seen any presentation. A lot of these decisions are really financial in nature, and I would appreciate if the finance committee had a presentation that allowed us to help you frame a recommendation in some way. So if I were a select board member and the long-term building committee would make its recommendation to the select board, my first question would be, well, what does the finance committee say? What were their questions and concerns? And you're not going to have that if we haven't received a presentation to understand what the numbers are to help along with that process. And so I feel like we've gone 5 years or 6 years without making a decision. And now we're going to rush into a decision without bringing all of the elected and appointed officials that can help in the process. I think we just put it into gear a little too fast, and we're going to make a decision without discussing it with this committee. So that's my concern. So I think I appreciate the need for wanting to make a decision as quick as possible, but what's another month at this point? That's my comment.
I understand the urge to have the urge and in fact the need to have a presentation on options to the finance committee. But the fact of the matter is, if such a presentation was to be created right now, there would be no numbers except for numbers that were perhaps, I think there's a couple studies from 2019. There's something from 2022. None of the numbers would be relevant at this point in time. What would be relevant also, I guess it's once a recommendation is made, then yes, I would certainly be more than happy to present something. But I guess
that's not the point. Part of making a recommendation is getting all of the information from as many people as you can, so you have the ability to make a recommendation. So Karen, I don't want a presentation afterwards.
Karen, if I may, as a member of the committee, I mean, I think what it comes down to is, degrees. I mean, really the money doesn't matter because all of it is going to cost money and none of which we have. So it really comes down to state your preference and then we can tell you exactly how much it's going to be, because either it's a little bit of money, a lot of money, or a whole lot of money. So, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Either you mothball it for a little bit of money, which is still a lot of money. You bulldoze the building for a lot of money, which I can only imagine going to the town and saying, we need a $4 million override to knock down a building, and you get nothing in return for that. It's a $4 million override, and all you're going to see is a pile of bricks being removed. Or it's a $40 million or $35 million override, potentially. But if that's the option that people want to go, then we can get real numbers. Because we've gone through numbers, there's 35 million, there's 30 million. It's very difficult for a committee like this to go through that kind of effort to really pencil down into numbers. It's degrees. And it's really saying, okay, we feel as a committee, this is the direction it should go. Then we're happy to come and get real numbers. But getting real numbers close is very difficult.
And I appreciate that. And it's not all about getting real numbers. It's really understanding all of the options and asking financial people to help weigh in on that, to ask the finance committee. That's my comment.
Okay.
That's my comment back to the finance, to the long-term building committee. If the finance
our
committee,
first charge has always been to the select board, not to the finance committee.
but you guys are our liaisons to the committee.
Right.
So you're liaisoning back to the finance committee.
Correct.
Of what you're going to do. And my comment as a finance committee would be, I think you guys should wait and do a presentation back to us. That's my personal opinion.
I think we owe it to the select board first.
Well, that's the question. Does the select board want a recommendation without having?
They may, after they hear it.
Maybe that should be a question to the select board to say, would you like the finance committee's weighing in on this or not? I mean, it's not a chicken and the egg. Again, there's a group of us here that have very good opinions on lots of things, and to not ask the committee to ask for their opinion that weighs back to the committee. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's ever going to, it was ever the intention or is the intention of the long-term building committee to exclude the finance committee, but our first report and our first recommendation would be to the select board. If they feel they want the finance committee input, then we can. I've been happy to, report back. We haven't had anything to report back. Okay, there really has not been anything truly until this meeting that occurred a week ago that we're finally going to come to some decision, because every meeting is going around the toilet bowl. Every meeting, because we can't come to some decision.
Right.
3 years ago, when I was on the committee, was prior to when, before Christopher came on, the long-term building committee made a recommendation to the select board to pursue having that building renovated, fully renovated up to code, and to determine whether or not the townspeople felt the same, that perhaps there should be a survey of some type or a poll of some type. And the select board did nothing with that recommendation. So it was sent back to the committee. And at that point, I mean, where do you go from there? So selling the land certainly is a unanimous no from the committee members, as it is a public water supply. Much of that acreage is wet. There's only about 16 buildable lots out of that whole piece of property. If you sold them on a wholesale basis, we'll say $200,000 a lot. That's $3.2 million, and they have to tear the building down. I don't think you're going to get very much money for selling that land. It's not very buildable. And then the school would lose their fields, which would require $18 to $20 million to, $8 to $10 million to fix up at another location. Yes, I suppose we can put all of those things to paper, but that's why selling the land has never been an option. And all three of the options that we're putting before the committee next week are inclusive of keeping the land in various degrees. Mothballing it, to me, I think is not an option. But anyway, that's for next week.
It's also worth noting that, frankly, the consensus to not sell the single largest piece of property that the town owns, the town owns, that's really been the only thing this committee has come to a consensus on.
Correct.
So it has unfortunately been a long year of lots of repeated conversations. And so it is my hope that out of this next meeting, there will at least be a direction for that recommendation to come out. And then as Ms. Brown mentioned here, there's no intention to cut out the finance committee. It is just that the charge is to the select board, and it would, and I again would be happy to include the finance committee after we know what direction we're heading in. But right now, there's no numbers. There's, as Cindy said, I could put together about a 3-slide PowerPoint and that would tell you the entirety of, unfortunately, what we've accomplished in the last year. So I am hoping that we will at least, like I said, have a direction after the next meeting and go from there.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open it up. I think Gary's got his hand up for quite a while.
So, I sound like a broken record with this, and, I apologize, but when they moved into the new school, I immediately said that we should do something with that building. And my recommendation was to level it, because can you imagine the tax revenue and also the expense side, what we've lost in the last 3-4 years? This has become a huge problem as far as the budget is concerned. 16 homes, okay, what does that generate, in revenue? $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. The money that we've spent to keep that building going. Why now are we deciding, what I recommended 4 years ago, to move the administration over to the school that was built? Why have we taken so long to decide this? This could have been done 4 years ago. But yet now, because the budgets are so tight, we're deciding to do this. I think
and this is only my personal opinion, that this has gone on too long. I think that they need to make a decision that it's great to own land, but the problem is once we own that land, we're giving up a lot of tax dollars. And I get that there's services that need to be provided against those tax dollars, but we've gone on 4 years. And my recommendation, if I was on the committee, is to level it, sell it. I don't even care if you get $1 for the thing. Let it be developed. We need tax dollars. We need revenue in this town, not to keep spending money to have 10, 20 people sitting in an administration building that they could have been in 4 years ago.
Thank you, Gary.
I think
Anything
Al's
else?
up next.
Al, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm clicking my unmute and whatever. And you know, Gary, there's a lot of wisdom in what you said. I just want to bring up 2 or 3 quick points, and this is probably a discussion for a longer period of time. I've been looking at the report that was put out in 2020 by, what was the name of the company, Christopher? Utile,
Yeah,
or whatever.
right. Utile.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a 2020 report where, according to their estimate at the time, it was plus or minus $30 million to rehab the high school. Now, Googling, and as somebody said the other day, ping Google. You know, you can always find everything whether you like it or not. In Massachusetts, for municipal buildings since 2020, there's been about a 5.25% to 5.5% per annum increase in increased cost. So let's just go with that and say that this is 4 years later. We're now at about $36 million. When we go to page 6 of their report, there are a fair amount of exclusions within this. So I'm just going to throw in $2 million just for sake of discussion. So by the time, and we don't even have a shovel-ready project. I mean, this thing will be well over $40 million by the time that we get it approved, designed, dug, et cetera, and it could be more. Who knows? The other thing that I found interesting in the report is on page 6, and you may want to just take a look at that. Item number 1: the building will be used for office use, but certain existing assembly spaces will be maintained, in parentheses, auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria. No other assembly space anticipated. But when you go back to page 4 and look at the schematic of preferred reuse scheme, the cafeteria is being demolished, the auditorium is being demolished, and I believe the gym is being demolished. So there's some discrepancy within the 2020 report that needs to be cleaned up one way or the other. I'm not making value judgments here. I'm just saying that is, they just don't match up. And lastly, and I'll just throw this out on the table, and I think it's an extension of what Gary was saying and other people, is we've got to play, as a town, we have to play 3-dimensional chess here. We're talking about an individual building. Let's just make the assumption that everybody loves the idea of relocating all the offices, the council on aging, et cetera, to this building. There'll be people clamoring to go into this. Everybody wants the shiny new object. What do we do with the others?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with the Earl School? What do we do with the old not high school, but town hall? What do we do with the Council on Aging? As only 3 examples. Then the question becomes, which is probably a workable solution, but is still a bit of a dilemma. The CPC has put a lot of money into these so-called historic buildings. They're not supposed to be torn down according to CPC regs. That's another workaround. So, I'm not sitting here, I'm making value judgments one way or the other, but I believe that the long-term building committee needs to play a little bit more 3-dimensional chess rather than and maybe that's not your mandate. Okay. I will accept that. But I think that there needs to be a more holistic view. And I think I've mentioned this a few meetings ago, it really doesn't matter, of the overall financial consequences to the taxpayers of the town and not just an individual building. I'll table it from there. I'm done for tonight, I'm sure.
I would agree with you, Al, and I think that's in part where I was saying if the finance committee could have its discussion, then I think there can be a financial analysis that should be done to say there's three options. Option A, here's the pros and the cons. There needs to be more, and I'd like to see it. And
we have addressed many of those issues. I'll just say this one thing quickly, Christopher, that, you know, just based on the events that took place at the annex in the last week, we know that something is going to have to be done with municipal offices in this town in the next 5, 6, 7 years. Something is going to have to be done. And in various reiterations of this committee, in addition to the existing town hall, has been discussed at roughly about the same price when all was said and done that it would cost to renovate the other building. The problem with the current building, the current high school, the old high school, is that it's 155,000, 166,000 square feet. It's way too big. And if you have to renovate it and bring it up to code, you have to bring the whole thing up to code, unless you start tearing some parts of it down. So yeah, you start going, back and forth with some of these issues. If the committee is given a direction to save the building, add on to town hall, do whatever, then we can develop a financial plan for one of those directions. But first we need the direction. I now I'm repeating myself. I'm like being on the long-term building committee. So I'm done.
So I just want to respond real quick just to something, Mr. Lees. You pointed out exactly the first time I took a look at that study. I said, hey, wait a minute, we got some serious discrepancies here between what it's saying here, but at the same time, you want to spend the money to knock down parts of the building. There's a lot of flaws. You go deeper, and there's even more flaws in that report. And I also agree that a holistic approach is exactly what's been needed. I will say, unfortunately, it's been very difficult to get that holistic approach to be, shall we say, adopted by many, by the committee, and it is. So but again, you hit the nail right on the head as far as what these conversations should be, and also the flaws in some of the studies that had been done previously. I guess I'm getting into repeating myself as well, but to Ms. Brown's point, a direction is necessary before we can even get to reporting any kind of real concrete numbers, and that's where we're at right now. So,
if I can just jump in for a half a second, Christopher, as the old saying goes, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. So we all know how difficult, working committees and years, and a direction has to be made at some point in time. So I'm taking nothing away from the people in the past or the work, but now is time to take that V, if you will, the broad, and start narrowing it down. And I agree completely with Karen that I think there needs to be a hard and fast financial perspective on this for the entire town, and come up with the best solution for the taxpayers. And then Hugh, it's all yours.
Thank you. I've been waiting very patiently.
I'm sorry you have.
You have been tonight, Hugh. Thank you.
First of all, mothballing the property is insane. All it does is push the can down the road, cures nothing, and the same issues come along whenever they come along. Next to that, putting all the town offices and buildings into it is not quite as insane, but quite insane. Al made the right point. Now you have half a dozen obsolete buildings to deal with, maintain, security, etc. Some are eyeing the library and other things. There are those who are very fond of the library as it is, and would fight tooth and nail against doing that. Basic problem is it's an eyesore, and not an eyesore, it is a white elephant. None of the programs of doing something with it make any financial sense. Whether it's 30 million, 40 million, it goes up. And Gary's got it on the number. You get rid of it, you reduce the expenses. You don't put in 30 or 40 million into nothing, etc. Holding on to land because you got it, people have done that for years and regret it. If it doesn't have a use, then it is an expense, not an asset. The other thing I would say is this is eerily like the sewer. Kicking around for years with nothing going on, nobody pays attention, and then suddenly it jumps out of the woodwork ready to go and do something right now. People in town have heard nothing about this for years and years. Sounds like the sewer. And a program comes in, a recommendation after the fact that nobody's putting input into except the committee, which has its own ideas. That'll sink like a rock. The only recommendation has an ability to be focused is there has been a lot of input beforehand, and it is a consensus, more or less, that comes up, so people have been educated. Education sometimes is propaganda, but I let that go. It has to be, the recommendation has to be the result of a consensus of things, not an idea that suddenly pops out of the woodwork and is asking for a whole bunch of money from the townspeople. There isn't there. It won't happen. End of speech.
Hugh, you made the point that I wasn't going to make, but it is a parallel to the sewer, right? So the infrastructure committee had made its decision, or I think was intending to, in November, to go talk to all the stakeholders, one of which should have been the finance committee, to say, hey, what do you guys think? 8 million, 30 million? And they didn't do that. And it was clear that if they had come to the finance committee and we had a discussion, maybe it would have become apparent that we support 8 but not 30, and maybe that would have been the direction it took. I don't know. But
a tale from my past, the town I lived in years ago. Large property loved by everybody, was going to be developed into some kind of housing for those empty nesters. So a lot of concern about what it would be in terms of is it going to be condominiums? Is it going to be this and that? How many bedrooms are going to be? School children, all that stuff. Highly controversial. Discussions went on for about 3 years. My figures may be off a little bit. For a long time, it was debated and debated and debated, and plans were brought in and plans were rejected, this and that. My point is, it went on for about 3 years. By the time it got to the 3rd year of town meeting approving various zoning changes, it passed unanimously because everybody was sick and tired of hearing about it. That's another way of saying they're fully educated. But when it pops out of the woodwork, I think Westport, anybody is, but Westport's actually, something is new that comes out of the woodwork, the first reaction is no. And that, if you're going to do something, you got to get past that and persuade people that there's something good in this rather than just a surprise that somebody you know nothing about is trying to spring on you.
Thanks, Hugh. Anybody else have any comments? All right. So thank you. So that's the update on the long-term building committee. So we have 2 other, I know it's at 8:34 here. And for the record, I want to note that Zach left at 8:13 p.m. and Gary left at 8:26 p.m. So both have no longer here. Go ahead, Cindy.
We have a quorum, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Audit committee. I'll do audit committee first. It's pretty quick. As many of you may recall, in the past, I put my camera back on. My husband was on a Zoom call at the same time, and we were sharing bandwidth, and I kept getting dropped off. So he's done with his call. He started after me, and he's done before me. So the audit committee, many of you will recall several years ago, with a prior to having a combined treasurer collector, we had some difficulty with our audits, and the audit committee was formed for the purposes of being somewhat of a watchdog to see that we were staying kind of on track with some of the items that were recommended through the management letter of the audit committee. I am happy to report that we no longer have any material weaknesses in the current audit. One page pretty much across the board of pretty much observances that have become standard boilerplate, with the exception maybe of one or two things that continue to have issues that we look at. One of the items being, we're in very good shape in our OPEB. Our OPEB account is funded at 13%, and some people may think that that's not a very big number, but that's almost double what the state average is, and almost double what most of the communities around us have. So an OPEB of 13%, they felt was very strong. Our pension through the Bristol County is funded at roughly 60%. It had been a little bit higher, but investment returns at the end of the fiscal year of 23 brought that number down. You will note that this is fiscal year 23, ending 6/30/23 that I'm referring to. So that number has now rebounded back up to the roughly 70% range, with a targeted fully funded date, I believe, of 2037. Issues that always get covered are things like network security. In fact, the IT director has asked for some funding and has been granted funding through CIPC for additional malware security to be installed, and he continues to work on the overall network security. Fraud risk, making sure that we do continual tests in our system to detect any fraud that may cross over our borders. Discussion about ARPA funding and making sure that we are aware of the expiration dates of some of the items on the ARPA funds that we have. We still continue to work a little bit on the closing process and tax liens. The town accountant and the treasurer collector have made great strides in both of those areas, but there's always a little bit more work to be done. And also there was a notation about the special revenue balances from items that were left over from prior town meeting warrants from annual town meetings of the past or special town meetings of the past. And we have certainly addressed some of those in this most recent meeting. So the audit committee, I think, has done a good job and continues to do a good job of being a watchdog, if you will, over the financial reporting process and just the financial connectivity between all of the departments in their receipts, in booking their receipts and reconciliations, et cetera. And we now get a very clean bill of health from the auditors this past year.
So thank you for that update. So Nicole, congratulations. Thank you for all you do. I think you're doing a terrific job, and it's great to see. And I don't know if I don't believe our treasurer is on with us, but I would forward that sentiment to her as well as a thank you to both of you in your departments for doing such a great job that we don't have management letter issues as we had in the past. So thank you, Nicole.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and I appreciate it. I have a great assistant, and treasurer collector has some great people down there, and we work every day to make sure that everything runs like a smooth engine.
And it is duly noted. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Roselli is very, very pleased with the progress that the town has made, but most specifically the relationship and the progress that both the accountant and the treasurer collector has done.
Terrific. Congratulations. Thank you. Thanks for that update. And so you're still meeting quarterly, and you'll go through each of those points in specific and kind of dig in and all of that. So you can update us as the year goes along with all of those. But from what you read, it doesn't sound like there's anything of clearly no material weaknesses, which is fantastic. Right. Some of those seem very boilerplate, I'm sure. I'm sure Roselli, on every single letter that he writes to every single town, is to talk about ARPA funds and make sure you're doing it. So very
the fraud risk, the network, right, all of those things, right.
All boilerplate.
So these were things that are pretty much boilerplate for the most part, almost across the board.
Right.
So just a couple of exceptions, but nothing that he was concerned about.
Anyone have any questions on the audit before we move on to the personnel board? Nope, I see none. So another update for you again, Cindy, you've been very popular tonight with your committees. So the personnel board, and I know you can do a very good Cliff Note version of it here. So if anybody's, after Cindy speaks, if there was a pretty detailed presentation that was done till last night at the select board meeting by the consultant, and I would encourage if anybody wanted to really dig in to go ahead and listen to that part of the meeting. So there was a lot of information that came through. But Cindy, maybe you can give us the 8:41 p.m. Cliff Note version.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go anywhere near the detail that she did last night. I will just note there's a copy of the audit and the management letter in our drive, in our shared drive, as well as the classification and compensation study. It is a draft form. And that's how I will really preface other remarks. The personnel board has not had the opportunity to meet as a board to review the contents of the classification and compensation study. The consultant did go through some of the the process and how they arrived at the comparables last night through a very arduous process that they go through with determining what are good comparable towns, and they use many factors to determine that, none of which I will go through now. But they have a good methodology to make sure that we are being compared to the right towns and to the right types of pay scales. So some of this is just a little bit premature. And once again, I won't identify positions yet because the personnel board has not gone through this. There are some outliers. Unfortunately, I can't think of maybe more than maybe one that might be a little bit on the high side. But we've got to dig through the numbers to see if there's some additions that are included in that salary. We've got a few outliers certainly on the low side that we have to address. One of the items, and I brought this to the attention of the select board last night, as well brought it up with the consultant. In their report, they do indicate that Westport really does have a need for some professional HR support. I mean, we have a sizable budget.